Hello, Web3D. Welcome. My name is Nicholas Paulus. I'm happy to have you here in the Visionarium Lab at Virginia Tech to present our paper called X3D Field Trips for Remote Learning. So we're really excited and obviously thrilled about Web3D technologies can last. And if you speak web, we're ready for you. We can integrate and consume all that great data and services that are out there published in the standard web stack. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, I want to do a quick, very quick review of the learning applications that we've been inspired by and that we've worked on in Web3D over the years. Then talk about the disciplines and the domains that we worked with for this paper and the scope of this paper and the kind of lessons that they connect to in terms of their pedagogical purpose and the reason why we're able to use Web3D technologies in the educational setting, undergraduates, professionals, graduates, for example. Along the way, we've seen all kinds of design challenges. That's really what this paper is about, how we address them, and the kinds of feedback that we received. There's obviously a lot of potential and great work to do, so let's see where we can go on our field trips here. Well, virtual experiences and learning have been going on a long time. We started to see some real momentum build in the natural sciences and geography and hydrology, for example, as more and more of our colleagues, became equipped with these nice capture platforms, 360-degree cameras, LiDAR, drones, etc. And we started to publish that and put those into, again, educational contexts for the students at Virginia Tech. We also know that it's supposed to be fun, and with Open-Ended Agency, users can really engage with their field trips and the place that they're going to, even if it's virtual. 3D is a great platform to help make sure that we have common reference points and grounding, right? So if we're talking about a new building in civil engineering, being able to look at the scale and walk through it from all kinds of perspectives, again, is really powerful. And we've used immersive and Web3D design for some award-winning sorts of projects that you can see there on the wing. It has a video link. So we know that there's no substitute for going on the field trip, right? We all want to go there for real, but there's a lot of reasons sometimes that we can't, for time or money. And so virtual experiences can provide, reasonable, compelling surrogates for that physical field trip. But even if you are able to go, your time might be limited. So you want to make sure that you spend your time on site most efficiently, right? So in a certain way, also these virtual field trips can prime us for spending our time more wisely when we do actually get to the location. It's super important, right, in all of these examples and all the other ones in the literature that it's a real partnership and a design dialogue where you're talking with the instructor, talking about the standards of learning that it has to connect to, the concept inventory, right, what sort of activities they might do in the traditional educational setting, and then how can we translate those into a virtual setting. So we kind of collected in this paper a series of research projects as we're trying to understand the usability and deployment of these on a land grant scale, a mission that includes graduates, undergraduates, professionals coming to Virginia Tech to learn about land management practices and all sorts of things, as we'll see, including environment design. So a little breakdown there. And as we go through these, I'm just going to point out the main lessons. And of course, you've read the paper. But in any of these places that we want to go, right, we can often count on a few common elements, right? And we know we're going to have a map of a place. Maybe we have some local data like a a sensor that was in the stream for the last 10 years, and we want to go and look at that sensor data. We might have 3D objects like a bridge or a sculpture or a shrub, right, that are set in a location and have potency in terms of the pedagogical value, right? We want to portray them, we want to show them and use them as lessons. So 3D objects, and then now we have cameras that are capturing 3D spherical video and imagery, and this gives you a photorealistic sense of place, right? So what we want to talk about mostly in this paper is sort of the three kind of flavors of challenges that we encountered, and these are probably going to apply to any future sorts of virtual field trips that you might take on the web, immersive or desktop or by phone. First one is, how do we put the stuff together, the scene composition? I mean, times we're processing different data sources, we've got to merge them, register them, etc. So there's a few sort of technical and engineering challenges there. The second thing is the 3D user interface. And this is an interaction design kind of challenge where, depending on the activity and the pedagogical purpose, you might want to change a navigation mode, right, for example. And this becomes a problem of interaction design. And as these virtual field trips become richer and you start to build more data into them, sensors or tables and other kinds of data, you're trying to think about how you lay that out on the screen or in the immersive environment. This is information-rich kind of layouts. So the three flavors of our design challenges. All right, well, we get equirectangular projections from a lot of these cameras. They come in now, more and more resolution. And here, actually, you can see behind me an example of one of our captures over at Strubles Creek on our Stream Lab. And we're just downstream from campus, and where we have several monitoring bridges set up. And we have a whole number of interesting things that you might want to see if you come to Strubles Creek, right? We have the sampling bridges. Maybe we've scanned those with a terrestrial or a drone-based or a handheld kind of LiDAR. So we've got objects in places, and we want to show them in context. So we're trying to integrate these field trips, obviously, with more of an overview and a survey kind of knowledge of the place, okay? We've got viewpoints in every photosphere, but if you go inside of photosphere and you're used to 3D graphics, you'll probably notice that your text comes out rendering backwards, right? So we know we have to flip these equirectangulars. Here's just a quick example of kind of what I'm talking about, right? We've got locations here on a map where we've gone out to the field. We've captured photospheres and 3D objects. 3D objects including Professor Mansell here, who's sampling the ramps patch with his plant shoe application, entering GPS and natural observation data. Ramps are delicious, by the way. They're a relative of the onion family that we enjoy very much in the springtime here in Appalachia. So we've been able to contextualize now this activity in the place at McDaniel's Nut Grove, for example. Now we've been able to bring together over the years, based on this idea, a lot of different kinds of content and for different purposes. So I'm just going to show quickly a few of these virtual site visits that we've done. So one of them is with the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, long trail, limited amount of time, but they're talking about surveying from view sheds of the Appalachian Trail, natural, cultural sites of historic significance, trying to understand what parts of the landscape to preserve if you're walking along the trail. So we can take them to a virtual, all the sites along the trail in an afternoon. And that's a lot easier than hoofing up the backpack and the boots. We've also used it in graduate education, design activities. Okay, I'll talk about the project where we had graduate students designing with USDA software, image software, their planting recommendations for specific sites. And they were able to design, share, and then present those designs through a virtual field trip. And then finally, we hosted an agroforestry conference here in Blacksburg. And I'll share with you a few images and examples of how we were able to take the attendees to the conference, which was before COVID and here physically in Blacksburg, take them to many sites in a half a day, and thus give them extra experiences and also prime them for the sites that they were going to see in real life. Okay, so here's a little picture of the Appalachian Trail Conservancy crew here in the Visionarium. We're looking at it in stereo in this case, and they're looking across the valley at where the trail is going on the way to Angel's Rest, which is an iconic location right outside of Blacksburg, just a little northwest. Here's an image. This is also in a video from the lab in Vimeo if you want to watch it, but Professor Munsell and his students, and you can see in the background, they've actually planted a whole series of different species in various locations on a certain hillside based on the spherical imagery that they acquired in the field. Here's another example. This is from the conference tutorial. And actually, I can bring this up, I think, if I hit that, and then I hit this. We'll load up the example here with that we use in the forest farming, right? We've got several sites we want to visit, right, back there. Some of them are talking about golden seal, some about ginseng, some about black cohosh, some are hardwoods, some are mixed woods. And basically, we just want to browse the environment right, by hopping around different viewpoints. And we're going to always make sure that we go outside the sphere and then back into one. So here we are in one of those examples. And I might be pointing out to you some things about the slope and the density of the planting. Maybe it's something about the canopy or the ground forest floor, what kind of soil is here, right? And maybe we want to go to the next location, and I'll just hop to the next viewpoint, right? And on a desktop, this would just be page up and page down, right? Okay, so being able to take our conference attendees to several places would have taken 2 days to drive to them all, but in an afternoon, we're able to scaffold and create lessons about all of these special locations and the considerations for management. And here's just a picture of an attendee in the exhibit hall at the conference going to the Ramps Patch with Dr. Munsell. And this was actually the Ramps Patches in New York. It's probably 10 hours away from the location. Okay. So we had some initial successes, some real compelling experiences that were focused, right, on different disciplines and on specific pedagogical purposes, right? So the next kind of design challenge that we had to come across was about the 3D user interface, right? So I'm here in Immersive Cave. I've got all kinds of 27 million pixels around me to project and look around. I can use 6 degrees of freedom navigation, right, with my wand device. And that seems pretty natural, but if I'm on a desktop or on a phone, right, I might have to experience the same content, but just with in a different way. So I'm going to talk about some of the challenges we face just based on the standard kind of the standard X3D deployment. Okay. So we worked with Katie Meany. She's one of our co-authors here and a professor in the School of Visual Arts. And one of her undergraduate classes and one of her specialties is environment, and exhibit design, right? So you think about public sculptures, you think about museums. How does the content, the user, the context all communicate, right, to make an experience? And so she was really interested in the Bauhaus movement and Herbert Bayer's sculpture called the Chromatic Gate. And so for one of her projects with her students, one of the units in the class, talking about environment and context, was to take the chromatic gate and put it in different places. So in different contexts and locations. And we were able to do that with a virtual field trip and of course, easily with X3D. But some of the things that we came across, right, were that if you're putting the photosphere around the object, where's the ground, right? It's a sphere. So essentially we had to create an invisible floor in order for our walk mode to function as expected. And you can see this in the video and also in the web version. Invisible floor, the viewpoint starts at the center of the sphere, 1.6 meters or whatever your avatar size is, and you explore and navigate the environment in walking. So I'm just going to step away for a second and load that up here. Okay. So yeah. So here we are at the Bauhaus School. This image is copyright Dirk Wendell. But you can tell what we're doing. We've put our avatar, our virtual camera, right, on the ground. So now I can walk, and I can literally walk through the chromatic gate. Let's see if I can get in there from behind. Right, but now I'm observing, I'm experiencing this sculpture at real life scale, and it also has its context. And we can take this to Mars, we can take it to the beach, we can take it all kinds of places. It's actually installed on the West Coast in California somewhere. You can go visit it. Herbert Bayer's Chromatic Gate. So one of the design challenges around 3D user interfaces was, navigation and trying to make sure that the user saw and experienced the world as a walker, from ground level, as they would as a human. Okay, so navigation mode, a little bit more about that. Fly is awkward. We can tilt and roll. It doesn't quite seem right when you're inside the sphere, outside the sphere. Walk works more like we expect it to, like you're on the ground level, you're looking around, you're on an invisible floor. And you know, the default in X3D, the examine mode, is kind of the opposite of what we want, because really what we just want to do is sort of pivot our head from the inside out rather from the outside in, which is what examine does. So we looked at the turntable mode, which is an experimental mode in XFreedom. It's not in the spec, but it does have some nice features, right? There's no roll, and it's in the web browser. So if we sort of dug into this, we started to think about, okay, well, these remote field trips work pretty well if you're using certain kinds of metaphors to map your 6 degrees of freedom of your camera control. Well, on a desktop, it was that the default implementation kind of moved the camera in the direction that you were dragging, right? So it's sort of like camera-centric. But the instructors and the folks who were going to deliver this sort of realized that, sort of said, hey, is that right? It doesn't feel quite right to me. And they were working on the metaphor more of like a touch screen where I might have the photosphere here. And when I drag, I'm actually dragging the sphere, right? Not the camera. I'm not moving the camera. So that was the main difference, right? We just basically had to reverse the drag vector. And so we thought that's a good idea. Let's try it. We piloted it out with a bunch of the stakeholders, and it was overwhelming that they preferred the drag metaphor to work inside the photospheres. And so that's what we deployed with the class. All right, the USDA issues certificates for our silviculture and forest management programs. These are people from USDA or BLM or indigenous nations. Every year we graduate a cohort of 30 of these people who are now trained and can make decisions about how we manage our forest land, right? So there's gonna come up with a variety of challenges in their career, different regions, different kinds of species, right? And so the certification is meant to kind of give them the tools, theoretical and otherwise, for best management practices, land management. And so we decided to build, when COVID came, we said, we've got to pivot, still need these people in the field. Let's get the certification done with virtual field trips. Okay, and this is an opportunity. So we know we have these places, they're all well measured. We send out Dr. Munsell, and we enlist his students and his colleagues, his team, to annotate these trees with property ends that are all basically displayed in different layouts with HTML, right? Divs and Z orders and so on. So we're seeing overview of a map. We're seeing the photosphere of our location. We're seeing details of each forest plot. So here's kind of like what that overview looks like, right? It's kind of pretty much the same that I've got on the phone, right? And if you go to that URL, we've used the inverted turntable, the pull and drag metaphor in these environments. And then if you can pull out different, maximize different kinds of information displays about those trees, right? For example, their size, their species, age, things like that, where they live in the overall site in terms of this plot. So as you're designing a land management program for this site, you're thinking about all these different plots and you're thinking about all these different trees and you're trying to make a good recommendation. So as you can see, a lot of design challenges and obviously logistical too, but once we can put a URL up, a URL is the place that you go for this field trip, right? It's another address. It's just a virtual one. So the art students gave us a lot of qualitative feedback, probably the most, we categorized them into a couple themes, right? Affinity analysis. Most of them were really changed their sense of scale in their discussion. When they're talking about a sculpture environment, looking at a static picture is very different from having intentionality to explore and look at the object from different viewpoints, right? And understand it in relation to yourself, your scale. They were excited about the novelty of, having classwork that was in VR and that was neat. But that agency, that they could do this virtual field trip, kind of go off on their own to do certain things was really valuable to them. So those are a couple things that showed up in the School of Visual Arts class where we deployed these virtual field trips. COVID came, we did the NASP certification program with professional foresters, right? So these are people who are already working for the USDA or BLM or the indigenous nations managing lands. And usually they take a week and a half, 2 weeks, they travel to a location, they're focused in on these activities. It's an intensive program, right? Short burst of education. But with COVID, there was a number of challenges, people are still at home. They still have to deal with their kids and the boss and all this sort of stuff. And they've been online all day already. So there were a few challenges, but overall we saw 89, 90% of the respondents really saying like, this was valuable. This was a worthwhile surrogate experience, my virtual field trip. Even if they had come to Blacksburg for this training, they wouldn't have been able to visit the North Woods of Maine, right? A southern Georgia, pine stand, northwestern rainforest, right? So they actually got a really well-rounded experience, sort of despite maybe the fidelity and detail that they might be missing. And indeed, some of those subjective comments, a few of our really astute, I think, students, noted some things that we're going to have to work on, which is that, hopping around and teleporting to these different spheres kind of makes it really difficult to integrate kind of the full space in some sort of survey knowledge, some overview, right? So these are the things we're going to work on next. We want to keep on that usability improvement, iterative and progressive. And of course, we're going to be offering these classes on into the future. So we've thought about some different ways of creating better spatial context and spatialization of the information. So having maybe not just one sphere at the middle of the plot, but also looking into the plot from the 4 cardinal directions. So you actually have 5 spheres per plot. Understanding how those plots relate. So maybe instead of, an overview map, we really do get the LiDAR from the location, and you can see the slopes and the angles and some elevation in there as you're moving between the locations, the plots. And the other thing, again, about sort of information-rich integration, we know we can do this better. We make it easier so that if I know that tree 13 is on screen in my photosphere, oh wait, where is that over here? All right. Oh yeah. Well, now the data in the table for number 13 shows up at the top. So we could coordinate some kind of sorting of the data table based on what the user is looking at. That's, I think, would be a valuable feature going forward. So thank you for your attention today. I want to welcome everyone to drop us a line, take us on a field trip to your place, or if you want to collaborate on more kinds of research in this area, how to make these experiences more effective, authentic, usable. We know that it's not just about virtual environments and virtual characters. We need disciplinary experts, and the instructors are what make the field trip, right? Your docent explaining to you real time what you're seeing. This matters, and it helps with retention and all sorts of things. We think that this could scale up a lot more, right? These 360 cameras are out there. So maybe if we work as a community to establish some templates and maybe some simple services, we'll be able to all visit each other a little more readily, even in the times of COVID. The web is wide, and I look forward to visiting your part of it. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to take questions now.